Cette couleur, c'est le bleu de Prusse. Son histoire est passionnante. Saviez-vous que ce pigment a été inventé par hasard au début du XVIIIe siècle? Le bleu de Prusse est le tout premier pigment synthétique. C'est un alchimiste, théologien prussien un peu fantasque qui l'a créé sans le vouloir. Techniquement, c'est un mélange de sulfate de fer avec du ferrocyanure de potassium. Alors c'est un peu technique, mais plus simplement, en fait, il l'a créé en jetant dans sa cour des produits et il a vu que sa cour devenait un peu bleutée. Ce chimiste, Dippel, a inspiré l'écrivain Mary Shelley parce qu'il est né dans un château qui porte le nom de Frankenstein. Et c'était donc un savant fou qui a inspiré le personnage de Frankenstein. Donc il crée ce pigment en 1706 et avec un ami, Disbar, teinturier, ils vont le mettre au point et garder la formule secrète jusqu'à ce que Disbar en parle à un de ses élèves, un Français, qui va le fabriquer lui de son côté à Paris. C'est pour ça que parfois il va être appelé le bleu de Paris. La formule du bleu de Prusse devient alors très connue et avec l'invention de la gravure, durant ces mêmes années, le pigment est extrêmement utilisé. Il remplace très vite l'outremer, qui à l'époque est en fait issu du lapis lazuli, donc un pigment très très cher. Donc son utilisation est croissante pendant les décennies qui suivent. Tous les peintres utilisent ce magnifique bleu profond. Il faudra attendre l'invention des bleus de phthalocyanine 150 ans plus tard. Ils vont remplacer peu à peu le bleu de Prusse parce qu'ils sont beaucoup moins chers. Mais ça, c'est une autre histoire, on en parlera la prochaine fois.
By the way, it's a really interesting title. Why did you call it Prussian Blue, which is a sort of double entendre?
Well, it's a sort of phrase that everyone sort of, thinks they know the meaning of. Prussian blue, it's a pigment of paint that was invented, quite late in the day. I mean, I've got a friend who's an art historian, an art dealer, and one of the, when you're testing the veracity of an artwork, supposed old masters, one of the first things they do is look at the blue, because they can tell when it was invented just by analysing the chemistry. So if it's Prussian blue, they know, it's a painting that can't possibly be older than about 1800. Whereas if it was a different blue, then that's a different story. Interestingly, the same compound for the paint is also an antidote for poison, and the poison being thallium, and in its sort of essence, the stuff that's in Prussian blue can be put in a pill or a compound, and it's as I say this antidote to thallium, which was the favoured murder weapon of the East German secret police for until, of course, they found something better, which of course they use now, which is polonium, because you need less of it, and and it's twice as lethal as, thallium was pretty.
So why did you call the book Prussian Blue?
Well, because there's all sorts of. I like coming at a title and then working it into the whole fabric of the book in all sorts of ways. So there are references to Prussian blue because the blue was the same color as the uniforms of the Prussian army, it's all there's the poison reference, and there's a code later on to which it's relevant. So yeah, a whole host of reasons. It's quite a sexy title too. I've done two other books before this that had a colour in the title. I did March Violets, and then I did Field Grey. So this is the third one where I've had a title. Titles are, you can end up sort of having arguments with publishers. That's the one thing, the sales force will come back and say, oh, they don't like the title, and and they come back with something really awful. Any title dreamt up by the sales force is usually crap, and that's the one area where I do sort of behave badly and get upset and shout and say, well, do you think I just throw these titles together? It's like, they've worked into the fabric of the book. Sorry, is that?
No, I don't know that everybody realizes that publishers have a right to title the book as they want, and also to do the artwork, and while they consult authors, the publisher can actually overrule you.
My German titles are the worst, because they get they look at the translation and they say, oh, this won't work in German.
Lots doesn't work in German.
Yeah, well, actually, sometimes they've changed it for, frankly, politically correct reasons. I mean, like, I did a title which was called A Quiet Flame. Now, that translates perfectly well into German. Not least because it was a translation of something that Goebbels had said. He said something like, that when we anyone who thinks of Hitler will think of him with great reverence, and we think of our feeling for Hitler as a kind of quiet flame that we nurture. And because it was by Goebbels, and because I'd put it as the epigraph at the start of the book, the Germans wouldn't have it as a title, because the sensitivity to Hitler and the Nazis is so great. Then the what's called the Turken Inn, which was the SS barracks that we'd built, it was a former hotel, and in fact it's a hotel again now, a small one. And then is quite clearly the ruins of Hitler's own house, which, I mean, the foundations, and you can see where it was. I mean, there's no sign or anything marking it, but there's sort of the highlight, if you like, of the whole area is to go to the Eagle's Nest, the tea house that was built on a spur of rock that overlooks the entire area called the Kelstein. And you drive up this little winding road to a huge set of bronze doors that look like something out of Lord of the Rings. And they sort of fold back to reveal a kind of giant-sized marble tunnel. And you half expect to see the Lord Sauron, sort of advancing with a couple of hobbits behind him,
Or a dragon.
Yeah. And at the end of this tunnel, and even, I mean, Hitler he was too lazy even to walk through the tunnel. It had to be big enough to accommodate one of those giant Mercedes. You see pictures of Hitler walking looking lost in thought with a walking stick. Well, that must have been about the only walk he took that year, because everywhere he went in the car, And you get to the end of the tunnel, and there's a sort of set of polished brass doors, and which carries you in this elevator shaft about 130 meters up inside the mountain. Now, Hitler was very claustrophobic and didn't much like the idea of a lift shaft inside a kind of solid rock lift shaft. So he was worried about the engine breaking down. So he said, look, I think I want a second engine for this elevator. And of course, anything that the Fuhrer wanted, then that was fixed. And of course, being German, they'd sort of overthought the whole thing. So they got the engine from a U-boat, which was, I mean, literally the engine, the spare engine, would go from that gentleman on the end there right over to that gentleman there. That's how big, that's the size of engine that we're talking about. Because, like I say, it's from a U-boat. And then you come out at the top into it's a little bit like a sort of coffee bar in a sort of Swiss ski resort, and it's a tea house, and it was a tea house then, and it's a tea house now, and you could sit and have your cake and your tea, and everything is as it was. I mean, the furniture's not the same, but for some reason the Americans didn't blow it up. I mean, if you ever watched the last episode of Band of Brothers, there's a lot of it set down in that part of the world, and I think somebody prevailed on the Americans not to blow it up, and I'm very glad they did, because it's a historical place. I mean, I'm not sure that as I say, the Germans are entirely comfortable with the idea of what is effectively Nazi tourism, but of course that's why people go. I was there was 2 busloads of Koreans touring, and the one word of Korean I was actually able to understand was Hitler.
Doesn't translate into Korean, huh?
I'm mindful of the fact that I think most crime writers who have a character write too many, and so each one I do, I sort of think, well, is it up to scratch? Well, I will say I don't have a proper job, which helps. I mean, I get paid for my hobby, really. So, and I think it also helps if you're a kind of writer like me who's an obsessive. So, I mean, I'm compelled to write. I write all the time. It's not uncommon for me to sneak down to my study on Christmas Day and do a couple of hours. That way, you see, I suppose it's also a certain dissatisfaction with real life, you know. I have to be honest. There's something slightly weird about what I do, because it seems like I spend my life alternating on reality, as if reality isn't somehow good enough. And it's an escape. And, you know, the last couple of years, you know, in many ways, it's been quite turbulent for me on a personal level. But at the same time, I've managed to take, it's almost like seek sanctuary in what I do. And that way, I can escape from things by writing. And it certainly becomes a lot easier to produce a book a year. I mean, I don't know what else I do as well, really. I mean, I'm terrible at leisure. I really am. I mean, I always promise myself that, you know, I'll just lie on a beach and write a book, read a book. You see, I've made a mistake already. Freudian slip. But actually, usually what happens is I sort of, because I haven't got, you know, I'm not actually writing something, I start thinking of something and start making notes, and I have a good idea, and before I know it, the good idea is sort of spun out of control, and the holiday stopped being a holiday and has started to, you know, turn into something else. I try not to read people who are working in the same fields as me, as it were, because I don't really want to pick up anything on my shoes from reading them. So I tend to avoid almost entirely other crime writers and thriller writers. I write. What am I reading at the moment? I'm reading a book by Aldous Huxley, which is called After Many a Summer. You know, or if I'm not reading that, I'm usually reading something to do with what I'm going to write. You know, it's like research. Yeah, because it seems to me that I don't read enough. That's part of my problem, is I just don't read enough. So I grab the opportunity to read and research at the same time.
I mean, the point is, there are so many horrible things in my books that I have to find comic things to put in as well, to sort of get the reader through, to get the writer through, quite frankly. I mean, if it wasn't for some of the jokes and the humour of the character, I mean, you'd kill yourself, really. And and it sounds assumed and melodramatic and mendacious even, but to some extent, I've now got to the stage where I sort of feel I'm suffering from a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder from what I've written, because I've been writing about this for so long now, and I sort of feel it's started to sort of impact on me as a person. And that's really all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to deliver a kind of photographic experience, because that would be impossible. But what I am trying to do is create an impression, and the best way of doing that is for me to sort of record the small things and to feel the stuff as well.